This is Transqat. What is Transqat? Transqat is a safe space. It's a place for respectful conversations about transgender issues. It's a place for queer people to come tell their stories. I'm host Clare McCarthy. Welcome to Transqat. During a rally in Wisconsin last month, the Republican candidate for president made a rather startling claim.
Kamala supports states being able to take minor children and perform sex change operation, take them away from their parents, perform sex change operation, and send them back home. Can you imagine you're a parent and your son leaves the house and you say, Jimmy, I love you so much. Go have a good day in school. And your son comes back with a brutal operation. Can you even imagine this? What the hell is wrong with our country?
Now, obviously, this is untrue, and even he doesn't believe it. He was using hyperbole to make an entirely different lie, specifically that America's public education system has been infiltrated by progressives who are trying to recruit or groom children. It's the same argument Anita Bryant used against gays in the 1970s. It's the so-called gay agenda manufactured by religious conservatives in the 1990s. Hell, my last name is McCarthy, and even I think this approach is a tired, ignorant cliche. So no, you can't get free gender-affirming care if you get a B or better in calculus. Not only are 45's tactics pathetic and false, they are, in fact, a diversion from an ugly truth. Our public schools are not a safe place for queer youth. Even here in Connecticut, a state that has more protections for trans youth than most. Which brings me to today's guest. Melissa Combs and her Out Accountability Project is a formidable presence in this state. She's a warrior, fighting to make schools safer for queer kids, and I was grateful that she made the time to sit and discuss her work.
I did suck down a couple cups of coffee, so okay. I'm ready to go.
So you're ready to rock. Well, welcome to Transqat, Melissa Combs.
It's great to be here, Claire. Thank you.
It's Friday the 13th. I just realized we probably should have scheduled around that, but
actually, I'm gonna push back on that a little because my youngest was born on a Friday the 13th.
Really?
And he is wonderful.
Okay. All right. So maybe we need to rethink this whole cultural preconception that Friday the 13th is not a good
Let's turn it on its head.
There we go. I'm all with it. We want to talk about the Out Accountability Project, and you are director. What's your title?
I'm the founder, and the kids like it when I call myself the Chief Cogitator.
Ooh,
yeah.
Latin derivatives. I love that.
Yes, of course you do.
Yeah. So you moved to the state 2016?
Yes.
Which was a rough year politically.
That is an interesting comment for sure, because we moved here from Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is, of course, an extremely liberal stronghold. And we moved here because of my spouse's work. And it all happened very quickly, to the point that we didn't get to come out first and look around and do things. So we decided to rent at first so that we could figure out where we wanted to be, which turned out to be a good decision. And so we did. We moved at the end of July in 2016, and I distinctly remember, I don't know, it was like some switch was flipped, because I was driving around town that first week, running all those moving errands, post-moving errands you have. And it was overnight, Trump signs and lock her up signs just sprouted from the ground. And I'm driving around literally thinking to myself, what have we done?
Yeah.
And I spent 2 years in that particular town, and then we moved to Farmington.
Okay. That's actually where I first became acquainted, not so much with you, but with your name. There were a series of incidents at the middle school, to whatever degree you're comfortable. What happened?
So my youngest, in the spring of his 6th grade year, started to identify as queer. And then school ended, there was summer, and went off to 7th grade, which in Farmington, 6th grade is at the upper elementary. The 7th is now the middle school. That was a horrific experience. And the queer kids were relentlessly bullied and harassed. Despite reporting it to adults, there were many times that these incidents were not investigated as they should be, as they are required by the general statutes in Connecticut. There was also, a hate incident involving a pride flag that was never addressed appropriately. And my child was assaulted toward the end of that school year.
Well, I was going to ask, what did the bullying look like? Because I think everybody gets a different mental image when you talk about bullying, because a lot of us experienced it in one way or the other, so we kind of plug in what we know. What did that look like for your kid?
So, obviously, verbal violence. The gay virus jokes, and I'm saying that in air quotes, obviously the F slur, and just the barking. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that when these kids are barking, it's actually a queer-phobic act.
Okay, I'm not familiar with this. Actual barking at...
Kids would bark at the queer kids.
Okay.
And that is a queer-phobic act. And so basically, it can mean one of two things or both. And the first one is that you are an animal. You are not human. The second one is that the act of barking is exhaling. And if you are actively barking and exhaling, then that means that you are not going to inhale the gay virus.
Wow.
Yeah, recover from that for a second.
Yeah,
and it was rampant. And the adults, any adult, I'm not just talking about the school adults, we all had to take a minute to figure out, wait, what? And so then the parents had to go to the adults in the school and say, actually, you got to deal with this barking that's constantly going on during lunch.
Yeah.
Because this is what it means. And the pride flag incident.
So they were displaying a pride flag in the school, or?
So there were some teachers that had them up in their classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And this was during a lunch period one day. And now, mind you, this is still at a COVID point where they had people trying to sit apart. So they had lunch tables like literally out in the hallway and the lobby to try to keep some distance between people. So this was in a hallway, this particular lunch table. And one of the kids, or two of the kids, got up and went into a teacher's office or classroom and ripped a pride flag off the wall. And they brought it back out into the hallway. And they started stomping on it, and two other kids joined in on the stomping. And then everybody started chanting, "Burn it, burn it." There was a lunch monitor and a teacher standing by that effectively did nothing. And down at the other end of the hallway, there was another person who saw what was going on and walked down the hallway and stopped it. Now, this was an act of indirect harassment because it was targeting like the GSA kids.
Right.
Indirectly. But there were kids who saw it, and of course the news spread. And it had an impact that was not appropriately addressed by the school. This was a hate incident. And after that, so the GSA had 25 to 30 kids in it. After that, it dwindled down to like 10. Kids felt really unsafe, even more unsafe after that.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, the adults that were the safest adults in the building for them, their GSA advisors, were forced out of their advising role. It was horrific.
So, A, you have a target on your back, and B, it is now going without saying that the faculty, most of the faculty, the administration, do not have your back. And I like it strikes me that both the barking and this incident are ways that they thought, well, we're getting around it. I'm not calling you the F slur. I'm not saying this to you. I'm just barking. Am I not allowed to bark? Are you, you're imposing on my free will to make animal sounds.
And some of the kids are clever like that.
There are a whole series of them that started in 2016 and carried through into, up through the 2020 election of, new interpretations of gestures. That gesture that used to mean, okay, everything's okay,
right,
suddenly came to be associated with white supremacy.
Yes.
And they just, you just find a new way to signal, this is what I'm saying, I'm expressing my hatred to you, but in a way that you can't prosecute.
Exactly.
Because I didn't say it to your face.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I would say equally egregious is that bigotry is alive and well in adults in the building too. And I'll take a minute here to acknowledge that there are also safe adults. And in particular, there were 3 teachers there that my child knew were safe. And if something went sideways, that they would immediately go to one of those 3 people. But we had situations with teachers actively making queerphobic statements in the classroom. We had a situation where a teacher would not refer to children at all, trans kids at all, because she had some sort of problem with pronouns. And so
I'm just not going to call on you at all.
There
rather
was
than
no
use
engagement with those kids in the classroom, so they were not participating in that class until I had to have a conversation. We'll take a moment also to say here, too, that 7th grade year, myself and a handful of other fantastic parents that are now, of course, close friends because we endured something pretty horrific together, we were all trying to work with the district, with the school and the district. Here are things you can do to make these kids feel safe. Here's how you can build a safe, affirming learning environment.
Here are some resources you could put in the classroom or in your school library.
Mm-hmm. So we tried to work with them. And ultimately what ended up happening was, after months of trying, I filed some allegations with the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. And they are now investigating the school district.
This is in 2022 that you filed. So we're talking 2 years-ish back.
Right.
Now. Yeah.
And then I naively thought that, okay, they're under federal investigation, so they'll watch their P's and Q's for 8th grade and sent my kid back. And that was a mistake. And
Did you get the sense that instead of, okay, let's comply with what we need to comply to get through this, that they were just digging in their heels and saying, we're not going to do this? I mean, obviously that's an interpretive question, but
I'm not entirely sure what the motivation was. I do think there were some good folks who wanted to have all of these things in place for these kids. But at the end of the day, it's what the leadership decides to do or not do. And I'll point out that as a parent, sending your child into a hostile environment every day is soul crushing.
What were you seeing from your kid during that period? What sorts of effects were all of these things having on them?
Well, it's all the things you hear about in the research, right? Academic performance plummeted. He went from being basically a straight A student to C's and D's. And this is a kid that was motivated, liked going to school before, liked it. And, so fear-based absences started, self-harm started, and we had, and of course, suicidal ideation started. So there was literally 2 years of every ounce of our effort as parents went into keeping him alive because of what he was enduring in school.
Yeah. I just had a conversation recently with an author named Abby Maxwell, whose new book is a memoir of trying to protect her trans daughter in New Hampshire. And everything you're saying sounds like the conversation I had with Abby, with that level of frustration of dealing with administrators, the effects on your kid. And you're sitting here, you're obviously very deeply involved. I'm a first person narrative of a trans person, so maybe we're just more aware of it. But it seems as if all of those effects are so obvious that would be the case, that if you put a child in that kind of a situation, obviously those are the effects that are going to happen.
Indeed. And it takes courage to be an upstander, especially in our climate right now.
Yeah.
Negative societal attitudes are winning the day. And I was just with a teacher last night who is an amazing advocate for kids, right? And she is pushing the superintendent in the district where she works to do the right thing. And she fully knows that it could get her fired.
Yeah.
And she's doing it anyway. And people live in fear of losing their jobs. Job security is a big thing.
Yeah.
Especially in a district like Farmington, where the pay is on the higher end of the scale across the state. It's a good job to have.
It's one of the wealthier communities.
And people have their own families and things, life things to worry about. And I get that. But no one's job should be on the line for standing up for a kid. That's the kind of twisted world we're living in right now. And it needs to stop. It needs to stop. So
enter the Out Accountability Project, because you're right. If you're inside the system, standing up means putting your job at risk. And I know plenty of teachers who right now are openly saying, yeah, I'm just trying to keep my head down. I'm going to get through the year. You were saying that those kids in middle school took a pride flag off some teacher's wall. Most teachers right now would be afraid to put that up because you would get a reprimand in your evaluation for I don't know, proselytizing, for preaching. So the situation inside the system is pretty grim right now. So there is a need for something on the outside that's pushing for, and here's the big word, accountability.
Right.
So tell me how that came to be.
So after that 8th grade year, we pulled him out of Farmington public schools and put him into a magnet school that has been A+. And so what that did was it freed me up some, because I was obsessively researching and networking over the course of those 2 years to figure out the most effective ways to advocate for my child, right? And it was so much work, thousands of hours. And what I noticed over those 2 years was that there was a real gap for parents and caregivers, like a one-stop shop for information about what are my options and what can I do. And so once he started going to that school and got settled in, and it was pretty clear that things were going to be okay, I redirected my attention to filling that gap. And so I spent 9 months working with a group of LGBTQ plus advocates and organizations who helped me shape the project into what it is today. And So then I launched in February of this year. So we're fairly new. And what inspired that launch, because it was a little bit ahead of schedule, was an announcement from some legislators that they wanted to introduce 2 bills. And one was a Save Women's Sports bill, which you have seen in various parts of the country. And they wanted to introduce a bill that would force outings of kids to their parents. And I was like, well, here we go. And that's what launched the project. Was I was at that press conference as a voice of opposition because I knew journalists would be in the room. So here we are today. And the project, looking at the needs and where the gaps were, the project has 3 parallel tracks. The first is creating an action network of parents, caregivers, allies, and educators. So there's a lot of support groups out there for parents and caregivers, right? And that's amazing because we do need those. This is not about support. This is about, we need to take action here, right? So just like an example, just last night, a bunch of people from the project's network showed up in North Haven to stand there in support of a teacher that people were saying a lot of ugly things about, right? And I just got a text as I was walking in here that what happened last night at that Board of Ed meeting was a master class in shutting down bigotry. So other actions include different things from supporting legislative priorities to writing in somewhere else. So even though there's not an active legislative session right now, there are steps that can be taken. That's the first track. The second track is resources. Right. So if your kid is being bullied or harassed, what are your options? And there's so many different ones. Some people choose to pull their kid and homeschool. So there will be homeschooling resources on there if people want to do that. There will be resources for how to talk to your Board of Education, how to talk to your administrators, things like that. But the biggest piece of the resources that is a huge undertaking is what I'm calling the accountability index. Yeah. And we're looking at a number of different factors with schools, like, is there a GSA? Is there an active GSA at the school? Do they teach comprehensive sex education? Those sorts of things. And we will be taking all of those data points and issuing a grade for that school. And the database for this will be published on the project's website. I'm aiming for December 31 because magnet school and regional school choice option applications open up in January, where people can come and look. Or if people are moving here from a state like Florida or Idaho, where is a safe school for my child?
Well, the situation you were in 2016. Okay, we're going to move to Connecticut.
Right.
All the counties, all the towns kind of look the same from a distance.
They sure do.
What's actually going to be supportive?
Exactly. So this index, there will be a list of schools that get an A. I am happy to say I know a couple of them. Yeah. I'm sure there will be more as we continue to work on the data points. And so those are the resources. And then the third track is policy, because there are a number of things that we can do to make schools safer. Connecticut already has a lot of good policy in place. Yes. Really strong non-discrimination statutes, safe school climate statutes, but there are things that we can do. Yeah. We need data for number one. So we got some things through this past session related to getting some data points in the future through surveys, the school climate surveys that children and parents typically receive in May, June. And then this coming session, there's some other priorities that we're talking about that I'm not quite ready to reveal, but there's so many things that we can do to further strengthen the already wonderful non-discrimination statutes. And that's where a lot of my time goes, and really where the Action Network comes into play.
So do you find yourself, or the project in general, find yourselves educating lawmakers, advocating, testifying, if you will, in front of boards Is that part of that mandate?
So there's a variety of ways to support the progress of policy. So the Action Network, I asked them to testify in support of some legislation, and there's two ways to do that. You can submit written testimony, or you could show up to the scheduled public hearing where that bill is going to be covered and testify in person. You can write your own legislators and ask them to support certain things, and then being visible. So one thing we noticed at the Capitol this past session is that the LGBTQ plus community is not a presence there. Meaning, so basically Matt from Equality Connecticut and myself were the two that were regularly there. Whereas other movements like Husky for Immigrants, they had a strong showing there every day. So did the people working on the child care, the pre-K child care initiative that's so important. They were there all the time. And we did have a lobby day and had great turnout with that, which was fantastic. What we need to do is build on that for next year.
Right.
And so in getting people to be visible in the building.
So is that a daily presence, you're thinking, or like weekly?
This next session, I will be there every day.
Every day, yeah. Wow. That's a commitment.
Well, what you find is legislators have a lot of ground to cover, and it is not humanly possible to understand the intricacies of each issue, right? And so when you're a presence in that building, you become that person that they come to for an education. You become trusted. And the transgender issue especially is extremely complex. And so I would be asked questions by legislators if something was coming up. Like, okay, can you give me some talking points for this? Can you tell me how to approach this? And so there is support and there's interest, and that's one of the things that happens when you are there in the building. Now, I would say for people who are not steeped in policy like I am, just showing up there on one of those lobby days, so that there's a bigger group makes a difference.
Hi, folks. For the first 2 years of Transqat, I focused on two goals: create quality conversations and maintain a consistent schedule. I've done that. Now I need to turn some of the focus to money. I have no illusions about this show turning a profit. That's for podcasts with a large organization behind them. My goal is simply to make Transqat pay for itself. You get to access the show for free, and it's important to me that this always be the case. But you might not know that there are fees, subscriptions, equipment, and travel costs behind the production. How can you help? Well, on the support menu at transqat.com, select Donate, then hit the PayPal Donate button. You can make it a one-time thing, or you can set up a monthly or even yearly recurring donation. Also on the support menu is an option to sponsor. Your business or organization can sponsor one or a block of episodes in exchange for a 30-second ad and a social media mention. Details are on the site. Listeners, if you know of a business or group that might be a good fit, let me know so I can reach out. Or maybe you could do some of the legwork and ask the next time you're there. If this show has value to you, if you support civil discourse around trans and queer issues, support the show. And as the Scottish woman at the end credits says,
please consider supporting our mission with your monies. Any monkeys will be gratefully received as well.
And I mean, for me, personally being in the building, and I think a lot of other people need to see this too, is that there is care and attention to the issues surrounding the LGBTQ plus community.
And that there are, I mean, this is where you become something of a networker, in that if you're physically present in the building, you have connections with Q+, with, Equality Connecticut, all these other groups that maybe don't have the time or the personnel to send someone to the State House, but a legislator or an aide can say, okay, well, I can go to Melissa, and if she doesn't have this, she can get it from Tony Ferriolo or from whomever.
Yes.
And so that networking aspect. plays a big role.
It sure does.
Because we do have good groups. You said that earlier, but we do have good groups here in Connecticut that are trying to serve the community.
Absolutely. So much good work is being done and so much commitment to it and passion for it. And from a youth perspective, I will say we do need more for youth, and there's a really big gap for 18 to 25-year-olds. So it's almost like once you get your kid through school, not higher education, it's like everybody takes a seat back for a minute and breathes.
Yeah. Which is well deserved.
Right. So some of the youth organizations are starting to address and some of the pride organizations are starting to address that gap and putting things together for the 18 to 25-year-olds. But the one thing I think people need to know about organizations like Q Plus that are doing work with youth is it is life-saving. Q Plus is one of the reasons my child is alive today. And these are organizations that need funding to do what they do. And I want to make sure everyone knows that they respond when called on.
Yeah.
So, groups are starting up, youth groups are starting up in new towns this year because of Q Plus. And reaching communities where the kids need that 2 hours a week to just get to be a kid.
To be yourself in a space where you're safe for 2 hours.
Yes.
For those of you who aren't, first or secondhand experience with that, think about that for a second, where you live your life in such a way that next Thursday I get 2 hours when I can be myself, so I'm going to hang on. No matter how much they're barking at me or no matter how much my teachers are giving me that look. I'm going to hold on for that. It's a small thing, but it is life-saving.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The index is fascinating to me. So how does one go about getting well, actually, let me back that up a bit. What are the sorts of data points besides do you have a GSA? Do queer topics make it into the curriculum? Are teachers displaying safe zone stickers or pride flags and things like that? What other components are the data points you're collecting?
There are many. We're trying to figure out how to weight all of them. But we are looking at how have districts handled book challenges in the school libraries. And we are looking at a survey of teachers. Are you teaching, are your lesson plans inclusive? We're looking at even LGBTQ employee affinity groups because there are some districts who have those. And if you are a district that has that, then that means that the kids are seeing themselves in the teachers and the adults around them, which is unbelievably important. So there are a few districts that do have that. Most of it we're having to get through Freedom of Information Act requests. And so that's been a bit cumbersome work for 169 school districts, but it's being done.
So rather than surveying, or maybe in addition to surveying, you're requesting FOIA materials so that you've got actual data as opposed to somebody's interpretation of that data.
Yes. I would say the FOIAs are the first priority, and then some surveying is a second. And then what we hope to do is, as the project's visibility grows, we're looking for students and parents and educators to continue filling out surveys. And with some of those, we will take the comments, as long as they've been vetted, of course, and add them to that district's profile on the accountability index. And understanding, though, that one person's experience is not always the same as another. There are people who have had horrific experiences in a school district and others who haven't. And so it's a balancing act, and I'm working with a PhD statistician to help weight all of this information and help with the whatever he's calling it, the formula that spits out the grade.
So this issue is worth, 1 point. You can see the teacher mind going right now. So this issue, you get a point if you're plus on it, but this is a 5-pointer over here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I spent the last few years of my teaching career as the school librarian at a high school, and that issue of book challenges in school libraries is really nuanced. I was more than a little appalled when there was a book challenge to the middle school library over a queer-themed book, and to placate the parents, the district pulled it off the shelf in the library and sent it up to me at the high school. Just put this in the stacks for 2 years and we'll send it back, which gives in to the fear-mongering. It shows that all you have to do is make enough noise and we will pull queer-themed books off our shelves, but didn't even have the integrity to stand up and say that, okay, yes, we don't agree with having queer-themed books, so we're going to hide it in McCarthy's library.
Well, let's unpack that for a minute. Because
please.
It's a lot more complex. The first message that district sent to the community was that parents have the right to deny access to educational material based on their values and what they perceive to be as their family values. And the reality is that that may not be right for my family. And by law, parents have the right to say, I don't want my kid to check out this book. They also have the right to opt their child out of a lesson in a classroom if they don't want them to have that lesson. True. So some parents opt their kids out of sex education, and that's fine. That is your right. What you don't have the right to is to tell my child what they don't have access, or what my rights are as a parent for what material I want them to have access to.
Or tell the school district, stop teaching sex ed, but for the students who want to be there, need to be there, we're going to make this available.
Right. And let's also acknowledge what teachers and librarians and others in the education system go through. They go through years of training to learn how to develop lesson plans. And they have continuing education on that, right? And for librarians, I know PhD librarians who I trust to establish policy around where a book goes.
Yeah.
And that's because they have that training and education. It is not, as a parent, I'm not going to pretend I know more than these professionals, and so frankly, I think it's arrogant to do that, to say parents should have a right or a say in what their kids learn. Okay, well, you do already. You can opt your kid out of a lesson.
Yeah. And
if you want your kid to learn something that's outside of the curriculum, you're welcome to go buy your child books on that subject.
Absolutely. And for me, it always came back to, in a library, be it a public library or a school library, nobody is holding a gun to your head and making you read a book that you're going to be offended by. I was about 100 yards from the bomb at the Boston Marathon in 2013. Wow. And I still, I'll see a book or a movie come across the table, and I still am like, I can't watch that. I don't want to read that. I'm not ready for that. More than a decade later.
Right.
So I just don't watch those movies and I don't read those books, but I'm not lobbying for the fact that because this causes me a degree of discomfort / minor trauma, please remove these from your shelves because it offends me. Then don't read it.
Right. It's that simple. And I would say that the sorts of books that they're challenging, of course, disproportionately impact the LGBTQ plus and Black communities. Mm-hmm. And so, unlike the bombing and feeling trauma related to that because you were so close to it, this is actually rooted in hate.
Yeah.
It's that simple. And when you look at what is said when these books are being challenged, whether it's a public library or a school library, It is based on partisan ideology.
Oh, yes.
And the most upsetting part about it for me is that when these messages are out in a community, what the LGBTQ plus kids and adults hear is their identity being questioned and that their safety and security is not a priority. And so it is up to leadership to shut this down. In other words, school boards. Shut it down.
Yeah.
Shut it down. Towns. Quite often with public libraries, librarians are awesome.
Yes.
I mean, they stand up. I had no idea that I should have been intimidated by librarians my whole life, but they stand up. So, but like what you saw unfold in Enfield, where ultimately the librarian left. And it's because the town selectmen got involved in that partisan argument and made it untenable for people to work at that library because multiple people have left that library system now. So these arguments are not only hurting the community, they're also affecting people's livelihoods at this point. It's got to stop.
When your child was looking for information, were there books, were there resources, public library, school library, or internet, social media type things? Where did your child go to get the information to make decisions?
So, a variety of sources. Obviously, with kids these days, a lot of it is internet-based, and my spouse and I put a lot of time into getting both of our kids to understand how to parse through information online because so much of it is false, but also the library. And my spouse took on most of that responsibility of taking them to the library and letting them check things out. So they did actually in Farmington, because that's where we're library members. That's where, they found a number of the sorts of books that are challenged in other communities.
Yeah.
And they may have been challenged in Farmington, but there was no public discussion. So.
But it wasn't, yeah.
And they were still on the shelves, so.
What's really insidious about that is that libraries are community-based. The people who use libraries are part of that community. It's their space. And this move to challenge books presents itself as a grassroots thing, but it isn't. It's Moms for Liberty. It's this nationally organized thing where they just send out the exact title and page number to go look for, and to object to. So open Maya Kobabe's genderqueer to page whatever, and that's the thing. Where instead of, well, why don't you take this book out and read it and talk to somebody about it and decide is this actually offensive, or is that one panel in a context where...
Well, there certainly is a penchant for cherry picking in these things. And you have communities where there are book challenges. You'll have one person challenge 50 books.
Right.
And it's because they got that list of 50 books off some website. And it's a person that doesn't even have a kid in the school district. They're just challenging it to challenge it. And you have to understand that this puts enormous pressure on the resources available for libraries, whether it's a public library or a school library, and on the school itself. There's human and financial resources that now have to be devoted to this. And it just, again, it needs to stop. It just needs to stop. Find another hobby. Knit or something.
There's so many out there. Yeah,
yeah, like
home brewing.
Yeah,
it would be fine.
Yeah, cheese making.
Oh, cheese making! What a great idea.
Yes, I always say, is there anything cheese can't do? Anyway, sidebar.
What is the? It was a food podcast that I used to listen to, and one of the questions that they would ask at the end is there any food that cannot be improved by the addition of either melted cheese or chocolate? And it was hard to find something, because cheese does make everything better.
It as does chocolate and butter. Don't forget butter. Yes. Yes. Well, no, it's actually apropos that we're discussing food, because it can be very comforting when you're going through some things like this.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You have 2 children for whom all of these subjects we're talking about apply.
I do.
So it might be fair to say that you're just actively out there recruiting kids to become queer.
Yep.
You're trying to get that toaster oven, Melissa, and it's not
something. I'm trying to win the gift card, the gift basket, whatever. No, it's it's interesting because my spouse and I we're on the same page about how to raise the kids, have been since day one. And we're a very liberal household, and our approach to things, it was quite different, I think, from the majority of households. So, both of our kids, we gave them gender neutral names. They have changed them both, and that's fine. And we did things, toys were not gendered. Because really, unless it's a toy you're using with your genitalia, it doesn't need to be gendered. So,
put the Tonka truck down.
Down, yes. Or at least lube it up first.
So they're both doing well?
It is amazing.
Yeah?
I struggle to really describe the cloud that is lifted from our house. My oldest has really stepped into herself, and you can quite often see her with me at various things. She's tough to miss. 6 feet tall, purple hair, and just, exudes this energy that's just positive, and people are drawn to her. And she's extremely eloquent, and she's standing up for kids like herself. My youngest was an advocate while he was in middle school. Then when he hit the 9th grade and we were in the new school, and I think he actually got a glimpse of what life is like when you just get to be a kid.
Yeah.
He really embraced that. And we stepped away, from the limelight, if you will, spotlight. And I am in awe of him because of how much work that he did to heal. And obviously there were things that we had in place for him to help that process, but my spouse and I did not anticipate. We thought it was going to take a lot longer, is what I'll say. And I'm just in awe of his strength and resilience. And so now that I know what a safe, affirming learning environment looks like, and I know the profound impact it has, the other thing I know too is that kids who have been harmed by school, with the right supports in place, can recover faster than you'd imagine. And you can get to a place where we are, that is, we're not a family going through trauma anymore. We're having fun, and this thing just isn't, this dark thing isn't there anymore. We kick that to the curb.
Me again. One last thought about financial support. I am working on designing some Transqat merch. I'm hoping that will be available in early 2025. Maybe you're asking, Claire, what can I do besides giving financial support? So glad you asked. For each episode of Transqat, I put out 2 to 3 promotional social media posts. And at the moment, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. If each of you were to share these posts with your network of contacts, we could grow Transqat exponentially. The more downloads per month, the more appealing the show is to sponsors. Also, more listeners makes it a little bit easier to book guests with national or international renown. So help promote the show. Share my posts, comment on why you enjoy Transqat, encourage others to subscribe and share. Back to the show. That's something that I would imagine folks don't think about is, you become known as the queer kid in your school. There are a lot more facets to you, and nobody's paying attention to that because they're busy pointing and barking, apparently, and making that your only feature. And it's ridiculous. Kids, are multifaceted, as are we all, and narrowing that down to that's all you are. Mm-hmm. How do you? I mean, what you're describing in terms of the personal situation and what you've described in terms of the workload for the Out Accountability Project is enormous. Those 3 checks, as you lay them out, sound quite reasonable, but as I actually think about it, that's just a never-ending amount of work. How do you take care of yourself while you're doing that?
The answer is I don't.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because people say this to me on occasion. I have a couple of people who worry about me, and for me, taking care of myself is advancing this. And there's also sort of this relentless kind of competitive side of me where I have to win. Yes, almost pathological. But anyway, so I guess I do little things here and there. I'm going to take the weekend away on the Indigenous Peoples Day weekend. Mm-hmm. Little things like that. But I'm surrounded by really an outstanding support system. Not only my family, who I want to acknowledge here that a lot of families don't engage in advocacy for a variety of reasons. Their kid may be stealth. They don't have it in them. They don't want to be public like that. I understand. I recognize all of that and completely understand that. And I meet people where they are. So my kids, every step that I've taken, working on this from day one, I have gone to them and I have said, okay, here's the next step.
Yeah. That
I think is best. Here are the pros and cons. Here are some alternatives. And at every turn, my kids their response to me has been, "You give them hell, Mom." And so I do have their blessing with the things that I do. And then in addition to the family support, there's also the queer community itself that's really embraced me. I mean, let's be real. I'm white, cishet woman.
Yeah.
And I've really been embraced by the community as someone who has the credibility to speak on behalf of queer kids. And I take that responsibility very